Okay, hello, welcome back. I thought we could talk about colorization today, but just a couple of things we could get out of the way, just so we understand what's going on. Um, if we go to the P5 editor, now let's say for example I make a really complex sketch, and you're a bit confused, and you feel whenever you write it you're creating errors. Then what I'll start doing is I'll copy this URL and I'll paste it into the description so you can open it up for yourself and you actually have the same sketch that I've worked on. I just thought for now, because our sketches haven't been that complex, you might not need to, but from now on I'll do that. Yeah, also when you open it up and if you want to start editing it, what you're probably best to do is do File then Duplicate, and that will duplicate the sketch in your own library, in your own account, so you can work on it that way, because I've created the project, you won't necessarily have access to it to do what you need to do. Cool, we've got that out of the way. Difference between JS and p5JS. p5JS is a library, JS is a programming language. p5JS has a bunch of functions that you can use to create the shapes, colorizations, the stuff you want on screen. And JS is just the language that you write in. Okay, cool. Also, one other thing, if you want to console log, we're not really going to focus on this, but let's say you wanted to write something to the screen, to the console here, you can do something along the lines of console.log, and let's say we put a string here of 10, and then you can see it logs it to screen 10. It does it multiple times. That's in case you want to debug errors. You shouldn't really find that right now. It'll be useful later on. Okay, so we've covered that. So yeah, let's talk about color. So coloring, if we open Paint up and we switch to Paint, yeah, Paint. Colorization. So color is mainly defined. This is the most fundamental way of doing it. It's defined by your RGB values. Yeah. So your RGB values are. Oops, I've got a paintbrush up. So RGB, and these are the redness, the greenness, and the blueness of your color, and they are 8 bits long. So think of it like 2 to the power of 8. And that gives you 256 combinations for each RGB value, and they range from 0 to 255. Now if you don't quite understand what this means, don't worry about it. All you need to know is each color range goes from 0 to 255. Now if you want to know more about it, think of it as the zero value being the index of zeroth, and so the range, if you count 0 all the way up to 255, so if you go 0 being your 1 and go all the way up to 255, that gives you a combination that gives you a value of 256. So in layman terms, each column can have a color range of 256, being from 0 to 255. As long as we understand that, that should be fine. If you don't understand the math behind it, it's fine. And you can also get a combination here called A. It's not that common, but it does occur, and that defines your transparency of a shape, and that again can go from 0 to 255 again, and that describes how see-through your shape is. So transparency state. Now if we go back and actually start coloring something, we'll actually have a look at that in action. Okay, cool. So if you go back to the references, it should show you what functions to use, and the function here you use is fill, and what you want to do is you want to define the fill before you actually define the shape. So if we go back into our editor and we just go just above this square that we have here, and we can just say something along the lines of fill, and we'll say something like let's say 255, so we'll make it very red, we'll make it not that green, and we'll make it slightly blue, or very blue, and we get purpley pink. Cool. And then if we do we make that a low number, it'll be mostly red. Okay, so you can define the color of your value that way. And also if we define our alpha values, we can say something along the lines of, if it's let's do 125, and you can see it's slightly transparent. Cool. Now if we like absolutely blast our values to the maximum they can be, so let's say 2000, then the program's smart enough to know, or the library's smart enough to know, that if it goes beyond the 255 cap, then cap it at 255. Similarly, if you go into a negative range, it's smart enough to know that not to go below 0. So that's cool. So let's Control Z that, so we have some interesting shape. Okay, cool, so we have red. Cool. Now, let's say we want to define another shape. Let's say a circle. So, a circle, we need to define its coordinates. So, let's say 200 by 150, and we'll make it 100 units wide. Okay, cool. Let's get a bit more. No. Let's. Okay, we'll stick with that. We'll stick with that. Okay, so you can see here, as we've defined the circle, it's taken on the same color as the previous shape. So if we want to define a new color, we have to say fill, just again, and we have to define a new color. So let's say we've got yellow. Again, if we define transparency here and we say something on the lines of 125, it will give us a mixture of the red and the yellow together and gives us this weird sort of orange. Let's say orange. Yeah, orange color. So you can have this sort of weird combination with the shape. Also, grayscaling. So let's say, for example, we wanted to do a sort of grayscale. So something like yeah. So here, so if we say something like 100 by 100 by 100, you can see we've got grayscale here. And if you don't want to do the 3 duplications, you can just do 1 column, and then you can do that. And then if you want to set an alpha value to that, you can say something like 20, and then that does its own thing. So let's leave that at grayscale. Let's talk about actually defining the line, the shape's outline. So this is the actual stroke line here, and we can define that by, we can actually define that. So let's actually look at the references so we actually have more idea of what we're doing. So let's say stroke, you can change the stroke color. So for example here, we can define the weight of the stroke, so how thick the stroke is, the stroke and the stroke itself, its color is defined by 3 values or 1 value if you want to do grayscaling. So let's give that a go. So what we can say here, we can say stroke, let's define its color first. So let's say something like, let's make it very blue. So say 0, RG is green, and then B. So we've made them all blue. And what was the weight? So W weight. Okay, so that's stroke. And then let's define the weight. And we'll say that is 100. Oops. That's pretty big. Alright, let's get that down to 10. And you can see it kind of bulges up. And then we can one thing to bear in mind is the ordering here. So let's say, for example, I get rid of the stroke weight, so Control X, and then Control V. In terms of stroke weight and stroke color, it doesn't really make a difference, but if I were to put the stroke weight below the shape, I didn't think that would work. You know, it's really new. Generally speaking, you want to define your stroke weight and your strokes and all the stuff before you actually draw the shape, because then you come into weird features like that. So generally speaking, that's not good practice. You want to define all the parameters for your shape first before actually defining the shape. So again, if you want to do, we would want to define a new stroke color for our circle. We'll go below and say something along the lines of 355. And you can see that there's different colors for the different strokes. And again, if you want to define a different stroke weight, let's make that a bit more smaller. 1, and you can see the stroke weight there is a bit smaller. So generally speaking, a good form of practice with p5JS is to define your parameters for your shape first, so those will be your parameters, then define the shape later, and then try and keep the shapes spaced out, like in one paragraph here and one junction here, so like that. So all the attributes attached to one shape should stay in that kind of section there. Okay, so let's say for example we wanted to define no stroke, so we actually wanted the outline to disappear. Don't worry about these comments here, we'll talk about that later in another video. You can say no stroke, because that's an actual function you can use. So that basically means it removes all the outlines of the shape, so these two shapes kind of look like they merge into one. So if we then say stroke that, and then you can see the stroke for this disappeared. You can also make it so that the shape has no fill, so you could say something along the lines of no fill. So no fill, and that removes the circle fill here. Because the circles now become see-through, the square kind of takes up half the screen. I think that covers everything for colorization in p5JS. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll put the sketch into the description so you can have a play around with it. But besides that, hopefully see you in the next video. Alright then, bye bye.